Alright guys, I'm going to show you how to make this mask. This has a metal piece here, so you can actually adjust it to your nose, and it has these ties. You can actually cut this here and tie it in the back of your head, and then it can be tied here, or you can squeeze it in here to match better on your face. And it has a pocket, so you can actually put any kind of filter material inside to make it more protective. So for this one, I'm just gonna make this video for everybody who's making masks using this pattern. And this was the pattern dropped off with the kit. So you need to first cut out those two pieces. The big piece is going to be the outside of the pattern. So you need to cut two pieces out of this big pattern and two pieces out of the small pattern. And this pattern is available online also, so I'll make sure I include the website for this. And when you cut these, make sure you have a symmetrical piece, or you can fold your fabric in half and cut it that way. So once you have those pieces ready, you will also need a piece of little wire. We're gonna use these for the nose, so it's easy to bend these wires, and you can zigzag stitch this on the edges. And I'm using these. You can use shoestrings, you can use elastic if you like, but this came with the kit, so I'm going to use these. So these tie in the back. Apparently the nurses want the ones that are tied in the back instead of the elastic that goes over the ear. First, fold each of those pieces just a little bit and iron them. You can just press them on the fold line that is shown on the pattern. So this is about 1/4 of an inch on each side. You're just turning them this way, and you're going to do the same thing on these pieces, about 1/2 an inch. So this piece becomes the pocket piece, and this one becomes the outside. I personally wanted to go ahead and start stitching first, and then I did the pressing of the sides later. You're going to stitch those curved edges. You're doing the same thing with your pocket fabric. If you have a pattern on your fabric, make sure you have the right sides of the pattern together, like this one, and then stitch that curve. So I'm going to go ahead and iron all the edges. So I'm doing these about 1/2 an inch. You can measure them if you like. And you do the same on the other side. We're going to do, I'm going to just press these fabrics a little bit too. I'm going to do the same here. This one maybe 1/4 of an inch. I just do it this way because it makes it a little bit easier to keep the So I'm going to start stitching now. I'm going to start with the pocket pieces. First, I'm going to do this curved edge. For those of you who are pretty new to sewing, You always have to do a back stitch at the beginning so that your stitch is secured and doesn't come off. And then you're going to try to keep the seam allowance even all the way. And you backstitch at the end, and you can trim all your threads. I'm going to do the same thing on this piece. I'm stitching the curved edges together. The fabric is right sides together. So once you're done with that curved seam, I'm going to open this up and top stitch the folds that I made. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and backstitch at the end. And I'm going to do the same thing on my pocket piece. I'm going to top stitch the folded edge. And make sure you backstitch again at the beginning. And I'm going to top stitch this other end as well. I usually cut little slits into the seam allowance here because it's a curve. It just helps it lay flat when you turn it right side out. On every curved edge you want to do that because otherwise when you turn it right side out your fabric doesn't lay flat and it has a lot of extra fabric bunching up there. You have to make sure you put the right side of this fabric and the right side of this fabric together. So basically, right side has to be on top of the right side, so you have the wrong sides on the outside. And we are going to stitch this top part first. So as you can see here, you have the seam allowances here. So what I usually do is first I match those seams here. This is the nose part, and I put the seam allowances on the opposite side, so whichever one you put on the left, put the other one on the right. That way there's not too much thickness in one spot. And then we're going to stitch from here to here and here to here. And you can do it, you know, in one stitch, but I find it much easier and it looks better if you just start from the corner and do the one side and then start from the corner and do the other side. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that stitch now. Always make sure those seams are on top of each other exactly. Trimming your threads will take a lot of time, so you can actually leave that to the end if you like. You can also pin your pieces together if you're new to this, so that your fabric doesn't slip. And when you do curves, you always want to make sure your fabric edge is aligned with something on the machine, either one of the seam allowance measurements here or whatever seam allowance you're using. You know, just make sure that you just follow that line all the way through and kind of curve your fabric as the fabric edge curves. So we're done with this edge here. I just get rid of those sticking out corners, and I'm going to iron this really quick, just so those pieces are all opened up. So now we're going to stitch the other end, and I will put those two seams together here, and again stitch here and here, so stitching the pockets to the outside fabric. Just one tip here before you do that: make sure you push that inside like that, so that the edges come together. They should line up. I'm actually going to do this all in one shot. You might want to pin this here, but I'll just start from here, and when you come to that corner, it kind of goes this way. So what I do is make sure my needle is in the fabric. That way I can put the presser foot up and I can adjust my fabric, just turn it, you know, a little bit, whatever that angle is, and then continue. So this is done. Okay, so now we have most of this finished. What I need to do here is we have to stitch the on this nose part, we have to stitch the little wire in here. So this I find a little bit difficult because the wires that I have are a little thicker. To zigzag stitch the wire into that corner, so you can stitch it here or here. You can also just make a zigzag stitch and try to slide this through, but I wasn't very successful with that. And you have to make sure you make the right width of zigzag stitch so that this wire fits through it. If you have a thinner wire, it may be a little bit easier to slide it through. But on this one, I couldn't really slide it. So what I do is I'm going to change my settings to a zigzag setting. And the zigzag has a code here, so I'm sure on your machine you have a code. And I put it like that. And this is a little tricky too, because the presser foot doesn't really sit right on here. And when you're stitching this, you have to be really slow, because if your needle hits the wire, you're going to break your needle, and you don't want to break your needle. But I kind of just manipulate my wire. See, like this needle is hitting on my wire here. So I kind of manipulate the wire to stay in the middle and make sure it doesn't get stuck also. And I go over the wire with my zigzag stitch, but really you are just moving your wire under the zigzag stitch. So you're not really zigzag stitching over the wire, but you are moving the wire to stay under the zigzag stitch so that your needle goes from each side of the wire instead of hitting the wire. And you really have to be very careful with this. This is how it looks. And now I can actually turn this right side out. So what I'm gonna do now is turn my fabric right side out. I'm going to iron this, and when you're ironing this, make sure you push all the edges open. Also, before you turn it right side out, clip all the curved edges and then turn it right side out. Then you have to bring those edges to the pocket to create a channel, and the strings go through this channel. This is the last step. I'm going to go ahead and stitch the channel. Now the other side. And make sure you're not stitching your elastic or your shoestrings into the stitch. Alright, so this is all you have to do. Now for the elastic, you can do it differently. You can use your imagination and creativity to make it look better. It basically looks like this.